Welcome, everyone, to our 2022-23 season announcement. My name is Claire Burovac, and I am the General and Artistic Director of New Orleans Opera. I'm delighted to be with you today to share the New Orleans Opera's programming for next season. Thank you so much for joining us. Your support means the world to us, and we are so grateful for the opera-loving community here in New Orleans. We kick off the new season with what is perhaps the most beloved of all operatic comedies, The Barber of Seville. Rossini's masterpiece may be the most performed comedic opera in the world, and for great reason. It's a joyful story that celebrates the triumph of love over adversity, with great melodies and sparkling orchestrations. The story concerns Rosina, a ward of Don Bartolo, who is plotting to marry her. But Rosina is in love with the poet Lindoro, who is, in fact, the rich nobleman Almaviva in disguise. With the help of Figaro, the local man about town, the two lovers outsmart Bartolo in order to live happily ever after. Our production will be set in the city of New Orleans in the mid-1800s, the period in which this opera premiered. It will be directed by Ned Canty, the General Director of Opera Memphis, who is, in my opinion, one of the best at opera comedy in the United States working today. Making her debut on the podium is conductor Emily Centuria, who has also conducted The Barber of Seville at Houston Grand Opera and Washington National Opera. We've got a great cast of singers planned for this production, starting with John Moore in his signature role as the title character of Figaro. John made his debut with us last month at the gala concert, and I hope you all got to see it. Also making debuts with us this year are Matthew Swenson as Almaviva and Raven McMillan as Rosina. Raven is a graduate of the Houston Grand Opera Studio and was one of the grand finals winners in the Metropolitan Opera competition last year. Matthew did his training at Eastman and Juilliard and has been working in Europe in recent years, including performances at the Maggio Musicale Fiorentino and the National Theatre of Prague. Those of you who attended the gala concert in February were already wowed by John Moore's rendition of Figaro's famous aria. Let's listen in again.
Figaro, son qua, Figaro, son qua, Figaro qua, Figaro là, Figaro qua, Figaro là, Figaro su, Figaro giù, Figaro su, Figaro giù, pronto prontissimo, son quel mio fomine, sorrido factotum della città, della città, della città, della città, della città. Ah, bravo Figaro, bravo, bravissimo, ah, bravo Figaro, bravo, bravissimo, a te fortuna, a te fortuna, a te fortuna, non mancherà, la 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 la, a te fortuna, a te fortuna, a te fortuna, non mancherà, sono il factotum della città, sono il factotum della città, della città, della città, della città.
Hilarious.
I'm delighted to invite Stephen Kemp, who will be our set designer for The Barber of Seville, to join me now. Stephen, welcome back to New Orleans Opera. You've been here many times now, yes?
Thank you so much. Love Woman's my 8th production, actually, yes. So I definitely feel like it's one of my artistic homes. I love coming back here and working with you all.
Excellent, and we love having you. So for our audience who might not know about you as the scenic designer, can you talk a little bit about your career and what brought you to this point?
Yes, you know, I went to grad school at UCSD in San Diego studying scenic design, and I worked for both David Gallo and Robert Brill as an associate designer right out of grad school going to New York, and did 10 Broadway productions, and as well as work at the Met and all over giant opera companies, especially with Robert, and you know, that just kind of transitioned into me getting a lot of opera projects, and I really ran with that, and yeah, so that's been my focus. This spring I will have opened 9 operas. But La Boheme I've been so excited about. I mean, we started on it back in June, so it's so amazing being here now and getting to, and I did, Joan of Arc, of course, right before the pandemic here. So it's just so exciting to be back in the building now, for the first full production, after, we've gotten back going.
Right, and we're so happy to have you here. I think we've got a photo of La Boheme because this will be airing after the production's over. So let's take a look at the photo of La Boheme. The reason you're here today is so we can talk about what's coming up in the fall. So you're going to be the scenic designer for both Barber of Seville and Hansel and Gretel, which is super exciting. Can you tell us a little bit about the concept for Barber of Seville and the French Quarter inspiration?
Yes, well, so we're transforming components of the existing set, which are already in the Spanish style, and we're taking that into the world of New Orleans, into antebellum, 1850s, 60s, early 60s, and pulling in. We're looking at different options right now, actually, because we're early in the design phase, and looking at where will we be doing it more specifically in the French Quarter, like a mansion within the collaged world of the French Quarter, or perhaps more of the Garden District itself, and and even more standalone mansion. So we're looking at so many different great options to pull in these details to really create that world for us of setting it here in New Orleans.
Fantastic. And I would imagine that makes for a good excuse to travel around the city and take photos of different types of architecture. I assume you probably have a large photo library of beautiful buildings in New Orleans, right?
Absolutely. And it's not my first time. I've actually designed Streetcar 3 times. So
of course.
I love one. But this is a whole different focus of what I'm looking at as I'm wandering around versus, looking at stairways and things for Streetcar. So yes, it's always amazing to have any sort of excuse to go look at the beautiful architecture here.
Exactly. And then you'll be back for Hansel and Gretel, which will be wonderful. And shortly in this video, we'll talk to Lauren Meeker, who is our director for Hansel and Gretel. She'll tell us a little bit about that whole process. But it'll be wonderful to have you back here all fall. Any favorite restaurants or things you're looking forward to doing when you come back in the fall?
Yeah, I mean, you gotta love the beignets, of course. But it's hard to. I actually haven't really tried, even though I've been here so many times. I haven't gotten to try that many restaurants because I'm usually here in the theater. So, I should. It's on my list to get out there much more and experience more of the restaurants here.
Excellent. Well, for those of our audience members who live here who are watching this video, I will give them an open invitation to take you out for a meal and take you to see some of the great food here in New Orleans. I'm so delighted you joined me today. Thank you so much for doing this. And Boheme is spectacular, and I can't wait to see what you come up with for the 2 shows in the fall.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited.
Thank you, Stephen. Our second opera of the season will be a new production of Hansel and Gretel at the Mahalia Jackson Theater in November. This is a co-production with Opera San Antonio, and it will be performed in Texas in a future year. Lauren Meeker, who was last here directing Turandot in 2018, will conceive and direct this new staging of the opera. On the podium will be Daniela Condolari, who recently made her debut at the Metropolitan Opera this past fall and was recently also named as principal conductor of Opera Theater St. Louis. Hansel and Gretel was written by Engelbert Humperdinck, a 19th century German composer, not to be confused with the pop singer who was popular in the 1970s. Humperdinck studied under Richard Wagner for a short time, and in fact, Hansel and Gretel was first conducted in its premiere by the great composer Richard Strauss. Here in New Orleans, we'll be performing the opera in English with English supertitles, so it's an evening for the whole family to enjoy. The story follows the classic German fairy tale. Hansel and Gretel are sent out into the wood to collect berries, and they are ensnared there by the forest witch. They outsmart the witch, and in doing so, free all the other children that she has enchanted. The cast will feature debuts in the title roles. Emily Fons as Hansel, who incidentally is starring as Rosina in the Barber of Seville at Santa Fe Opera this summer. Emily was hailed by Opera News as one of opera's rising stars and one of the best singing actresses of her generation. Our performances will also star Michot Marrero as Gretel, a role she has sung with the Deutsche Oper Berlin, where she is a company artist. Also appearing in this opera will be Chauncey Packer as the witch, last seen here in New Orleans in our recent gala, and earlier as Sport and Life in Porgy and Bess. But you may also have seen him on the big screen in the role of Spinner in Terence Blanchard's Fire Shut Up in My Bones. Michot, who will be performing the role of Gretel, has spent the last 5 years in Berlin after training at Yale. I'd like to share this clip produced by the Deutsche Oper Berlin, in which we get to know her a little.
Hola, I am Michot Marrero, Puerto Rican soprano here at the ensemble at Deutsche Oper Berlin. I will be debuting one of my dream roles, Micaela, in the production of Carmen, alongside Mr. Josef Calleja. So it's a really, really special role for me because it's a production that I've grown up with. I can't wait. Well, how does a Puerto Rican end up singing opera in the other side of the world? It's a long story. I always wanted to study music, but I thought it was, I don't know, it seemed impossible at the moment. So I studied science, and then when I finally realized that music was what I really wanted to do the entire time, I went back to school, went to the Music Conservatory in Puerto Rico, then did my master's degree at Yale University, and won a spot as a stipendiat in the season 2016 here at Deutsche Oper, where I never thought I would end up singing. But to be honest, there is no such thing as a children's audience because they are the most honest every single time. Like, if they don't like it, you will know. And if they love it, you will know. Your commitment is contagious, you know, like that enjoyment is not only yours on stage, but also from their part, and they feel the same way. So it's like a circle, you know? You give, but you receive. It's really cool. A year ago, I got to sing the role of Adele in a new production by Rolando Villazón. And I think one of the most amazing things is that the characterization is so different from a traditional opera. It was so nice and and so fresh, that's the word. I'm grateful and honored to call this place my home away from home.
I'm delighted now to invite Lauren Meeker to join me in talking about her thoughts about this work and her upcoming appearance with New Orleans Opera. So welcome, Lauren. We're so glad to have you back at New Orleans Opera next season.
Thank you. It's really exciting to return to a company that I've had such a great history with.
We're glad to have you back. And you are the General Director of Opera San Antonio, but you started your career as a director, correct?
Yes, I did. So it's been a really fantastic transition, one that actually just happened pre-COVID. So it's been a wild ride, but I'm really excited to keep both a general director hat on and a stage director hat on, especially for this production of Hansel and Gretel.
Excellent. And you've been to New Orleans, I think we were talking 4 times before, is that correct?
Yeah, I just had to look through and double check my notes, but it's been really exciting to have a history with the company since about 2015, and excited to extend that history with this next production.
Excellent. Do you have a favorite restaurant when you come to town?
Oh my gosh, isn't that a dangerous question? It having now been over 2 years, I can't say that there's an absolute favorite, nor would I want to offend anyone. But I will say that across the board, every time I have been to New Orleans, I really do make it a mission to try new places, and I have yet to be disappointed. I mean, it's just such an extraordinary city for the food, for the culture, for the opera, and I cannot wait to get back.
Excellent. Well, can we talk a little bit about Hansel and Gretel? Because this is a brand new production that you and the design team are putting together as a group. What can our audiences expect to see when they come to the Mahalia Jackson in November?
Yeah, such a fantastic piece, and really a piece that I haven't directed in many, many years. So in some ways it feels like approaching the piece for the first time. And Humperdinck's music is stunning and gorgeous. It tells a really important and effervescent tale all at the same time. There's lots to be learned, I think, as human beings within the piece, but wrapped up in a really brilliant musical and dramatic package. And so, you know, Claire, when you and I started talking, and then when I dovetailed that conversation into the work that I was doing with the design team, it became really important to do a couple of different things. not shy away from some of the intense life lessons that are baked in, maybe that's pun intended, that are baked into this piece with the classic Hansel and Gretel tale, but not only to not shy away from those, but also to create a package that can aspire to put those themes into a context that is a visual and oral delight. So we really went back and looked at research that talks about the darkness and the depths of German forests. We looked at the family structure. We looked at overall research on how to use villains within fairy tales to your advantage as both wonderful and delicious lures and also really over the top and amazingly creative characters that can just help propel us on a journey. So I'm really pleased that we've come up with a vision that I think will appeal to lots of different folks for different reasons. You can come for the gorgeousness of the music. You can come for a set and costumes that are going to be scary but charming and exciting and surprising all at the same time, and you're just going to have such an incredible cast on the stage to enjoy that journey as well. It's really not to be missed.
Thank you. And you know, one of the things I thought of as you were talking there is that you and I together have made the decision to do the opera in English as opposed to the original German, which really brings the storytelling much more immediate in terms of the audience. So even though we do have super titles or captions, as you might say, above the stage for every opera, this gives really that immediacy, and people who have kids who don't necessarily read yet, they'll still be able to understand the story because it's all in English, yeah?
Absolutely. And that's so crucial to, I think, what we're doing with our art form these days. But yes, specific to Hansel and Gretel. You know, we want to be able to make opera accessible. We want families and children, no matter what your exposure to opera may have been, whether it's your first time or your 81st time. And with a piece that hinges so intrinsically on being a tale that are life lessons for children in particular, it really helped make the decision early on to do this piece in English, to give it yet another level of clarity without sacrificing any of the gorgeousness that exists within the piece. So I think this is really going to help audiences feel like they can connect and be part of the world we're creating.
Yeah, thanks. And so speaking of the cast, you know, one of the crazy things about opera that I love so much is that a lot of roles are written for genders that are not necessarily the gender that's being portrayed on stage. And Hansel and Gretel has two of those examples. The role of Hansel, the young boy, is written for a mezzo-soprano. And the role of the witch, while it can be played by a soprano, it's also a tradition to have it played by a tenor. And so we are making that choice in this opera to have a mezzo-soprano singing a boy Hansel and having a tenor to sing the witch. Any thoughts about that craziness in opera and how audiences might look at that?
You know, it's so interesting. I feel like while there is always room to grow and learn as artists and arts organizations, the thing that's really interesting about producing theater is that, you know, all the way back pre-Shakespeare, male and female roles, like more often than not, those were played by male actors. There's a long history, not only in straight theater, but in the operatic arts, of casting for what is right for or acceptable for the role, not necessarily just being gender specific to any one individual character. So, you know, what I have always loved about approaching these pieces is that you can cast the right actor or the right singer in a role, and it brings something that is unique to that voice type and to that individual into the characterization. So, for example, having a mezzo or a woman playing Hansel, a young boy, actually allows us to open up a different vocabulary with voice, with physical choices, with relationships between the characters that will be totally believable and vibrant on stage, but isn't just as maybe straightforward as casting a young boy in that role. And the same is true with the witch. I mean, I think what's brilliant, whether or not you're casting a soprano or a tenor in the role, is really who is the individual that is coming in to play that role, and what can they bring to the table that's going to make that a witch unlike you've ever seen before, that's going to be really unique to how they interpret the material. And so in both cases, when we looked at casting across the board, to be able to really to put together an extraordinary group of people, whether it's in these quote unquote cross cast roles or pants roles in the case of Hansel, but all the way through all of the characters, to really find a group of artists that was going to bring something entirely special to this production is really the objective. And I think we've achieved it in really clever ways.
I agree with you. And I'm very excited to bring this cast to New Orleans. Our audiences know Chauncey Packer very well. He was last year as Sport and Life in Porgy and Bess, and he'll be doing his first witch, and he's thrilled and excited to do it, and I think he'll be stunning in this role. So
yeah, I had the pleasure of working with Chauncey in Turandot, and he's just such a class act and so endlessly creative, and that's absolutely what you need in the role of the witch. I mean, that character just really propels the whole piece to life by the time Hansel and Gretel reach her home in the forest, so or his home in the forest, depending on how you interpret that. But so Chauncey, I think, will just be endlessly delightful in that role.
Lauren, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. And we are so looking forward to this production and can't wait to have you back here in New Orleans this fall.
I feel tremendously lucky to be returning. Thank you so much for having me. We cannot wait to dive in both to the rehearsal process and the food. So I'm looking forward to next fall.
Excellent. All right, you take care. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thanks. In January of 2023, we will be presenting the New Orleans premiere of Charlie Parker's Yardbird for 3 performances, January 20th through 22nd. This production is part of the Rani and Amel Sangu Mai's Chamber Opera series. This opera was originally scheduled for March of 2020 and canceled at the start of the pandemic. We're very happy to put it back on the schedule. The performances will take place at the Jazz Market in Central City. The opera was written in 2015 by American composer Daniel Schneider, with libretto by award-winning poet Bridget Wimberly. Although it's about the jazz great Charlie Parker, the music that Schneider composed is definitely classical, with a traditional orchestration, but with a few melodic quotes from Parker's music embedded throughout. In recent years, this has become one of the most performed contemporary operas in America, premiering in Philadelphia with subsequent performances in Atlanta, Seattle, and Chicago, among others. Here's the story. In the afterlife, Charlie's spirit cannot rest, as he feels that he has not achieved his life's great work. He revisits some key moments in his past with some of the most important people in his life, including his colleague Dizzy Gillespie. The cast will include New Orleans opera debut artist Martin Bakari as Charlie Parker, a role he has performed with Pittsburgh Opera, among other companies, and Sidney Outlaw as Dizzy. It also features Angela Brown as Charlie's mother, Addie, and Angela was last seen here in New Orleans as Serena at Porgy and Bess. Let's listen to this brief clip of highlights from the world premiere in Philadelphia. This video does not include the casting we'll be doing here in New Orleans, with the exception of Angela Brown, but it's a great overview of the opera and the musical style.
What a night, what a sight, for sore eyes. Birdland, 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 I doubted that see this place again.
Please welcome Martin Bakari, our Charlie Parker, to talk with me about his love for this role and for the city of New Orleans. So hi, Martin. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us on this YouTube broadcast of the New Orleans Opera 22-23 season.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Claire. Thank you for having me.
Anytime. We're very excited about your upcoming debut in New Orleans in the spring of 23, I guess January of 23. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career and some exciting things you've been doing recently?
Sure. Yeah, well, I'm a tenor. I grew up in Yellow Springs, Ohio. I'm currently splitting my time between New York City and Seattle. It's a long story, but these are strange times. Yeah, I'm excited to go back to New Orleans. I haven't sung with the opera, but I've sung down there at the Sanger Theater with Wynton Marsalis and the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, and it's just one of my favorite places on earth. I visited New Orleans the first time when I was about 13. And I remember thinking to myself, one day I want to live there. And I haven't gotten the chance to live there, but I've visited many times, and any chance I can be there for an extended stay is a real treat. So I appreciate that. And I get to do a pretty cool piece with you all.
Absolutely. Well, I will say, having lived in New Orleans for about a year and a half now, it's a very seductive city. And
Sure.
once it brings you in, it's really hard to pull yourself away.
Totally.
So you'll come down here and you'll even more want to live in the city.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And you're going to be doing the title role, Charlie Parker's Yardbird with New Orleans Opera. Now, this is a role you've done before, correct?
It is. Yeah, I've done it many times. I did it with Atlanta Opera, and I did it with Arizona Opera. I did it most recently with Pittsburgh Opera. But it'll be really special to present this work in a city that knows and loves Charlie Parker, his music, and all things jazz.
Great. And could you tell us a little bit about the kind of music that exists in this opera, the style of the composition and any tips for an audience that might not know this piece and what they can look forward to?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's written by a jazz musician named Daniel Schnyder. He's a jazz saxophonist himself, a fine one. So there's certainly a lot of jazz influence, but there's also a lot of classical influence. There's a character who is European in the opera, so you hear a lot of sort of European classical influence. But also, I mean, for the jazz lovers out there, I mean, you've really got to be hip to the music. But you'll hear some quotes from some famous jazz songs. At some point, we're discussing doing something around midnight, and there's a quote from Thelonious Monk's "Round Midnight." One of the characters in the show is named Nika, and she had a piece written about her by Thelonious Monk. And so there's a little bit of a quote from that song. And so All the Things You Are. So there are a lot of jazz tunes that you love, but it's put in there in such a clever way that you really got to listen in order to pick them out.
Excellent. Well, we'll look forward to having you here and doing an in-depth study on that next January and telling all our audience where to listen. And are you looking forward to anything in particular about being in the city itself? I know you said that you know the city. Any favorite restaurants or attractions that you're dying to return to?
Oh, it's hard. I mean, the list is so long. I will say this. I mean, whenever I'm in New Orleans, I have to visit Frenchmen. And one of my favorite things to do on Frenchmen is to go to the Spotted Cat and tell the band, whoever that might be, that I'm in town singing with the opera, but I have some jazz chops. And when I'm lucky, they'll say, well, come on up and sing something. And so typically I'll have a chance to sit in with whichever band is playing that night. So that's always one of the highlights. But I mean, the food, the restaurants are just endless. So I'd be afraid to leave one of them out because there are just too many excellent restaurants that have left left me feeling very happy and leaving New Orleans about 10 to 15 pounds heavier.
So what you're saying is we need to wait to do the costume fitting until after you've been here for about a week and a half.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah, I'll send you my measurements, and then you can add an inch or two to each of the dimensions.
Very good. Very good. Well, Martin, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to talk to you, and we can't wait to have you back here.
Sure thing. My pleasure. Take care.
Thanks. Bye. Our final production of the season will be at the Mahalia Jackson Theater in April, Puccini's beloved Madama Butterfly. The story concerns an American naval officer, Pinkerton, and his Japanese bride, Cho-Cho-san, and the tragic consequences of their love affair. There's a good reason why Puccini is one of the world's most popular opera composers. His glorious melodies capture the emotion of the drama and pull at our heartstrings. The opera will be directed by Arya Umezawa, who was the director for the planned production of Butterfly for the Canadian Opera Company. The cast will include Japanese soprano Hiromi Omura in the title role, making her New Orleans opera debut in her signature role, and our very own Brian Email as Pinkerton. Let's listen to soprano Hiromi Omura performing Un bel dì.
Chi sarà e come sarà giunto? Chi dirà, chiamerà Butterfly dalla lontana. Io senza dar risposta me ne starò nascosta. Un po' per ceria e un po' per
now I'd like to introduce stage director Arya Umezawa. So good morning, Arya. I'm so pleased to welcome you to our live stream season announcement for New Orleans Opera. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Claire.
My pleasure. So you'll be joining us in the spring of 2023 as our director for Madama Butterfly. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your history with opera, and how you got to be an opera director?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Arya Umezawa. I am a stage director from Toronto, Canada, both where I was born and where I am currently based. And I guess my history with opera, I encountered opera at a very young age when I was about 8 years old, and I immediately fell in love with the medium. And so it was sort of from a very young age, I always knew that I was going to work in opera, or always hoped, I guess, because I do feel very lucky that it all worked out.
Right.
But I initially thought that the only way to work in opera was to be a singer. And so I pursued a degree in vocal performance as my undergrad. And in my first year, I think I stepped onto stage as a soloist for the first time and immediately knew that I had made a mistake and that I was not meant to be on the stage, which threw me into a little bit of a crisis, because I was like, but if I'm not a singer, how do I work in opera? So I took a year off and I considered sort of the things that I love about opera. And a lot of it had to do with the storytelling, the collaboration. I realized I could live in the rehearsal room. I could stay there all day, every day, and never get tired and never run out of things to talk about. So when I came back to my studies, I fired off an email to the head of the opera department and said, "Hi, I'm an undergraduate student. I know you don't take undergraduate students, but I'm interested in being a stage director. Is there anything we can do?" And that sort of launched me down the path of being a stage director. And I've had the great fortune to participate in the Marilla Opera program as an apprentice stage director. I then became the only second stage director in the history of San Francisco Opera to be awarded an Adler Fellowship. And now I get to make art across North America. And for that, I'm very grateful.
That's amazing. And we are all grateful to have you in the opera field. And I can't wait to present you in your New Orleans Opera debut. So can you talk a little bit about Butterfly and your thoughts about it? I mean, just in general, and what you might be thinking about for our specific production here in New Orleans.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to admit that Madama Butterfly is one of those pieces that I really wrestle with. And it does make me a little bit uncomfortable, which is usually a good sign for me that I'm engaging in the right conversations,
Mm-hmm.
So I try to lean into conversations that make me uncomfortable. And so there's a lot of conflict there. I mean, on the one hand, as I mentioned earlier, I love opera. Opera has been a part of my life for decades. And this piece certainly is a huge piece and a hugely beloved piece in the canon. And so there's that kind of component of my lived experience. And then there's also the component of my lived experience, which is also very important to me, which is my Japanese heritage. And specifically my experience as being part of the Nikkei community, which means the Japanese diaspora. So not just being Japanese from Japan and being, fully Japanese, but having grown up mixed race in a diaspora community with many of my community members who maybe experienced the internment camps during World War II, or the ensuing racism that happened post World War II. My father certainly is one of those people. So it's this real clash of my experiences. Butterfly brings me a lot of waffling, as
Right.
one can imagine. And so when it comes to tackling it as a director, I think one thing that I think is true of all of these canonical works where we highlight some of the problematic elements, so be it the sexism or the racism or the ableism or what have you, what I try to keep top of mind is that we're not actually reacting to historical issues. We're not reacting to the sexism of, say, Don Giovanni as it was presented in the 18th century. We're reacting to how these things manifest in the present.
Mm-hmm.
you know, if these things didn't continue to affect us to this day, I don't think we'd be upset by it, frankly. So to keep those issues, what we're talking about, the Orientalism, the power dynamics that are at play in the show, how this show literally came to be, and the expression of power that is at play in this show, just the fact that it merely exists. Try to keep those things top of mind and to not dismiss those or undermine them or subvert them or any way, but to actually like engage with them as topics of conversation and see if we can't generate something meaningful out of the discussion. And in that, hopefully making Madama Butterfly actually a value add to wherever it's being presented, as opposed to a harm or even an exercise in harm reduction. Makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot wait to see what you do with this piece. I'm very, very excited. And I wish you were coming tomorrow instead of a year from now. But is there anything about New Orleans that you're particularly looking forward to? Have you been to the city before?
Never been to the city. I can't wait. I love anytime I go somewhere new, and I'm particularly excited about this for New Orleans. It's like food, music, art. Like I can't wait to just, in whatever spare time I have, like go bounding into the city and seeing. New Orleans is known for so many delicious and beautiful things. I just can't wait to dive in and experience.
Well, you encapsulated everything that people about the city love about it. Music, food, and art. That's what we're about. And we're going to show you a good time when you get here. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time today. And we will look forward to your debut next year.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Arya.
Thanks.
If you're interested in learning more about Madame Butterfly's place in the operatic canon today, I encourage you to join us for an online series entitled The Butterfly Process, in partnership with the Boston Lyric Opera. The Butterfly Process has developed as part of Boston's commitment to inclusive storytelling with its artists and for its audiences that creates a new approach to presenting 18th and 19th century operas today. The aim is to discuss Madama Butterfly and how to incorporate its legacy in a way that celebrates opera as a multicultural art form. You can learn more at the BLO website about these conversations. That's our season for next year. Don't forget that every New Orleans opera production includes English captions projected above the stage. You don't need to speak any foreign languages to enjoy the opera. For more information about New Orleans Opera and our programming, please visit our website at neworleansopera.org. You can find all of the dates and pricing for the 2022-23 season on that website, and we hope that you'll join us next year for a great season of operatic performances. Please feel free to contact the box office with any questions about the operas or to purchase your subscription. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you at the opera.